I am Amber Thompson, 26 years old, and a successful real estate investor today. 9 years ago, my parents abandoned me in Greece with nothing but a note saying, "You're 17 now, old enough to survive." They never expected I would not only survive but thrive. Last month, I purchased their foreclosed home through my company. They requested to meet the new owner, having no idea it was me. I walked into that room and the look on their faces was priceless. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever turned a painful experience into your greatest triumph. Growing up in Westfield, Connecticut, I rarely felt the warmth of genuine parental love. My parents, Martha and George Thompson, were emotionally distant people who cared more about keeping up appearances than actually raising their children. Our sprawling colonial house with its perfectly manicured lawn and magazine-worthy interior was a monument to their obsession with status, not a home where love flourished. Dad worked in finance at a prestigious investment firm in New York City. He commuted 2 hours each way and often bragged about the deals he closed and the clients he impressed. Mom, on the other hand, dedicated her life to social climbing. She was on every committee, attended every gala, and spent hours each day maintaining her image. Both were physically present in our house, but emotionally they existed in a different universe altogether. Despite their emotional absence, I excelled academically. Perhaps it was my way of seeking their approval. By 16, I had a perfect GPA, was captain of the debate team, and had already started receiving letters from Ivy League universities. Yet the proudest moment for my parents was not my achievements, but when they could brag about them at their social events. "Our Amber is quite the prodigy," Mom would say to her friends over expensive wine, never having attended a single debate competition or academic award ceremony. In contrast, my younger brother Tyler was the golden child. 3 years my junior, he received all the attention I desperately craved. Dad taught him golf. Mom baked cookies for his soccer team, and family vacations were planned around his interests. I was an afterthought, the responsible one who could take care of herself. The summer before my senior year, Mom and Dad announced an educational trip to Greece. They presented it as a cultural experience, a chance to see the birthplace of democracy before I applied to colleges. "You will love Athens," Amber, Mom said, handing me brochures of the Acropolis and beautiful Greek islands. "The history, the architecture, it will give you so much to write about in your college essays." Looking back, there were warning signs. Dad spent hours on the phone discussing my independence with relatives. Mom casually mentioned how mature I was for my age during dinner parties. They spoke about my future, as if it were already separate from theirs. "Amber is practically an adult already," Dad would tell his colleagues. "She could run her own household if she had to." I should have noticed when they bought only one-way tickets, or when they were oddly specific about teaching me to use international ATMs. I should have questioned why they suddenly wanted me to memorize their banking information, or why Mom insisted I pack every personal document I owned. The night before our departure, we had dinner at our formal dining room table, something reserved only for special occasions or when important guests visited. Tyler was uncharacteristically quiet, avoiding eye contact. Mom kept checking her watch, and Dad drank more bourbon than usual. "To new adventures," he said, raising his glass in a toast. I clinked my water glass against his, interpreting his unusual sentimentality as excitement for our family trip. That evening, as I packed my suitcase, Mom came into my room. She sat on my bed, running her fingers over my childhood teddy bear that I still kept on my pillow. "You know, Amber, life is full of unexpected challenges," she said softly. "Your father and I have always admired your resilience." I smiled, taking her rare moment of tenderness as pride in my accomplishments. How foolish I was. "Thanks, Mom," I replied, folding a summer dress into my suitcase. "I am excited about this trip. It will be nice to spend time together before senior year gets busy." She nodded, a strange expression crossing her face before she quickly composed herself. Yes, it will be an experience you will never forget, she said, getting up to leave. At the door, she paused. Amber, you do know that we have always wanted what is best for you, right? I assured her I did, interpreting her words as maternal affection, rather than the preemptive justification for abandonment they truly were. The flight to Athens was uneventful. Mom took a sleeping pill and dozed most of the journey. Dad worked on his laptop, occasionally pointing out something interesting in the airline magazine. Tyler had stayed home with our grandparents, supposedly to attend a summer baseball camp. In reality, they were keeping him away from witnessing what they had planned for me. As our plane descended into Athens International Airport, Dad put his hand on my shoulder. "Time for you to spread your wings, kiddo," he said with a smile that did not reach his eyes. I thought he was talking about navigating the foreign airport or practicing my limited Greek phrases. I had no idea he meant permanently. Our first days in Athens followed a typical tourist itinerary. We visited the Acropolis, wandered through the Plaka district, and ate at restaurants with views of ancient ruins. Dad seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone, while Mom took an unusual number of photos of me for the family album. "Stand there, Amber, with the Parthenon behind you," she directed. "These will be wonderful memories." By the third day, they started making excuses to leave me on my own. "Why do not you explore the archaeological museum today?" Dad suggested over breakfast. "Your mother and I have some shopping to do. You would be bored with us." I did not think much of it. I was 17, and the idea of independence in a foreign city was exciting. They gave me some euros and a map telling me to meet them back at the hotel for dinner. That evening, they seemed oddly emotional during our meal at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. Mom actually hugged me before bed, something she rarely did. "Sleep well, Amber," she said. "Tomorrow is a big day." It certainly was, but not in the way I imagined. The next morning, I woke up late, surprised that my parents had not knocked on my door. When I entered their adjoining room, I found it empty. Their beds were made, and all their belongings were gone. On the desk was an envelope with my name written in Dad's precise handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short note and a bank card. "Amber, you're 17 now. Old enough to survive. Figure it out. We have paid for the hotel room for 3 more days and deposited $2,000 in the attached bank account. This should be enough until you turn 18 and can access your trust fund. Do not try to contact us or come home. This is for your own good. You always wanted independence. Now you have it." It was signed by both of them. I sat on their bed, reading the note over and over, certain it was some kind of sick joke. I called their cell phones. Both went straight to voicemail. I called our home in Connecticut. No answer. I even tried calling Tyler's phone, but he did not pick up either. Panic rising, I went down to the hotel reception. "My parents," I said to the clerk, my voice shaking. "Have you seen them this morning?" "Yes, Miss Thompson," she replied with a smile. "They checked out very early. They said you would be staying on alone. Is everything all right?" I somehow managed to nod and walk away before breaking down in the elevator. Alone. They had left me alone in a foreign country where I barely spoke the language, with limited funds and no return ticket. The next hours passed in a blur. I contacted the American embassy in Athens, certain that, once I explained my situation, they would help me get home. The embassy official, a woman named Janet, listened sympathetically to my story. "I am very sorry, Amber," she said after making several phone calls. "I have spoken with your parents. They claim this was a planned arrangement. Since you are 17 and will be 18 in 3 months, and they have provided some financial support, there is legally very little we can do." "They planned this?" I asked, the betrayal cutting even deeper. Janet nodded grimly. "According to our conversation, they have been planning this for at least 6 months. They claim it is an educational experience to teach you self-reliance." She gave me information about youth hostels, affordable accommodations, and resources for Americans abroad. Before I left, she squeezed my hand. "This happens more than you would think," she said softly. "Parents who cannot handle the responsibility anymore, who find unorthodox ways to cut ties. I am truly sorry." I returned to the hotel room that suddenly felt cavernous in its emptiness. 6 months. They had been planning to abandon me for at least 6 months. Every conversation about my independence, every comment about my maturity, had been part of their justification for what they were about to do. That night I cried until no more tears would come. I felt a complex mixture of emotions: betrayal, fear, anger, and beneath it all a deep, aching sadness. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had discarded me like an unwanted possession. In the morning, I assessed my situation with surprising clarity. I had 3 days of hotel accommodation, $2,000 that needed to last at least 3 months, until I turned 18, no return ticket, minimal Greek language skills, and no support system. I called the number for my trust fund administrator, hoping there might be a way to access the funds early due to the emergency. The answer was a firm no. The trust was ironclad until my 18th birthday, with no provisions for early distribution under any circumstances. Next, I tried calling my grandparents' aunt and even my parents' close friends. Each conversation followed the same pattern: initial shock followed by awkward excuses. "I am sure your parents know what they are doing, dear. It must be a misunderstanding. Have you tried calling them again? We cannot get involved in George and Martha's parenting decisions." It became clear that no rescue was coming. My parents had effectively cut me off from everyone who might have helped me. Either they had already spoken to these people and prepared them, or the people in their social circle were as callous as they were. That night, I sat on the balcony of my hotel room, looking out at the ancient city that was now, by cruel parental decree, my home. Athens glittered below me, beautiful and terrifying in its foreignness. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully feel the rage building inside me. They had planned this meticulously, setting me up to fail, perhaps even hoping I would be forced to come crawling back, begging for help. In that moment, I made a decision that would define the next 9 years of my life. I would not only survive, I would thrive. Not for them, not to prove anything to them, but for myself. "I will be okay," I whispered to the Athenian night, "and someday they will regret this." I had no idea then how prophetic those words would be. My first priority was finding affordable accommodation before my 3 days at the hotel expired. I moved to a youth hostel in a less touristy part of Athens, where I shared a room with 5 other young women from various countries. The place was basic but clean, and at €15 per night, it would extend my funds significantly longer than the €150 per night hotel. Finding work was harder. My tourist visa did not permit employment, and my Greek was limited to a few phrases. After being turned down by several establishments, I sat dejected at a small cafe near the hostel, nursing a cheap coffee I could barely afford. "You look like you could use something stronger than coffee," said a voice in accented English. I looked up to see a woman in her 30s with warm brown eyes and a kind smile. She introduced herself as Sophia Papadopoulos, a waitress at the cafe. "I could not help overhearing you asking about jobs earlier," she said, sitting down across from me. "Your Greek is terrible, but your English is perfect." I laughed despite myself. "I am American, just stuck here for a while." Something in my expression must have conveyed the desperation of my situation, because Sophia did not ask questions. Instead, she offered a solution. "My cousin Nikos owns this cafe. We get many American tourists who cannot read the menu. Perhaps you could help as a translator and hostess. The pay is not much, but there are meals included." That conversation changed everything. Nikos agreed to pay me under the table a small amount plus tips in exchange for helping English-speaking tourists and learning enough Greek to eventually wait tables. I moved from the hostel to a tiny room above the cafe that he offered at a reduced rent. Those first months were grueling. I worked 14-hour days, saved every euro I could, and spent my free time learning Greek from Sophia and the other staff. At night, I would often cry silently into my pillow, the abandonment still a raw wound. I sold my smartphone for cash keeping, only a basic phone to maintain emergency contact if needed. My watch, a sweet 16 gift from my grandparents, went next, followed by the gold earrings I had received for my last birthday. By the time my 18th birthday arrived, I had become a different person. My hands were calloused from work, my once soft accent now carried hints of Greek inflection, and my perspective had fundamentally changed. I called the trust fund administrator, only to discover another betrayal. The trust fund my parents had mentioned contained just $5,000, not the substantial amount they had always implied would pay for my college education. I transferred the money to my Greek bank account, which Sophia had helped me set up, and made a decision I would stay in Athens. Going back to America meant potential homelessness or dependency on the very people who had abandoned me. Here at least I had a job, a roof over my head, and people who, despite being recent acquaintances, had shown me more kindness than my own family. As my Greek improved, so did my position at the cafe. Nikos began to trust me with more responsibilities, eventually promoting me to assistant manager. I started taking night classes in business administration at a local college that offered courses in English. My world expanded when I met an American expatriate couple, Diane and Lawrence Baldwin, who became regular customers at the cafe. Lawrence was in real estate, buying and renovating properties in Athens' up-and-coming neighborhoods to sell to foreign investors. After numerous conversations about my situation and ambitions, he offered me a part-time job as his assistant. "You have grit, Amber," he said, "and you understand both American and Greek perspectives now. That is valuable in my business." Working with Lawrence opened my eyes to the world of real estate investment. I watched how he identified undervalued properties, negotiated deals, and transformed spaces. I absorbed everything, asking questions, taking notes, and gradually forming my own ideas about property investment. During this time, I made several more attempts to contact my family. Each was met with the same response: silence or brief, dismissive communication. "We gave you what you needed to become independent," Dad texted once a year after they had left me. "Stop looking for handouts." I stopped trying after that. My 20th birthday marked a turning point. Sophia and her family threw me a surprise party at the cafe, complete with a cake and small gifts. Looking around at these people who had become my surrogate family, I realized something profound. Family is not always about blood. Sometimes it is about who shows up, who stays, who cares enough to celebrate your existence. "You are not alone," Amber, Sophia said, hugging me tightly. "You have us now." That night I allowed myself to truly accept that I had built a new life from the ashes of abandonment. I had friends who cared, work that sustained me, and growing knowledge that would one day become my ticket to financial independence. By my 21st birthday, I had saved enough to become a junior partner in one of Lawrence's smaller property renovations. The project was a success, yielding a 15% return on investment. I reinvested every cent, gradually building a small portfolio under Lawrence's guidance. "You have a natural talent for this business," he told me one evening as we reviewed the numbers on our latest project. "Have you thought about taking this skill back to the States someday? The market there offers different opportunities." His question planted a seed that would grow into my next big decision. As much as Athens had become my home, I knew that returning to America with my new skills and perspective could open doors that remained closed to me as a foreigner in Greece. 4 years after being abandoned, I had transformed from a terrified teenager into a confident young woman with marketable skills, savings, and a plan. The scared girl who had cried herself to sleep in a strange hotel room was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had learned that survival was just the beginning. Thriving was the real goal. After 4 years in Athens, I had saved $30,000, gained invaluable experience in real estate, and built a network of contacts in both the American expatriate community and local Greek business circles. Lawrence and Diane supported my decision to return to the United States, with Lawrence even connecting me with former colleagues in Boston. Boston is a strong market, he advised. Not as competitive as New York, but sophisticated enough for good investment opportunities. Plus, it is far enough from Connecticut that you will not have to worry about running into your parents. The day before my departure, Sophia and the cafe staff threw me a farewell party. Nikos, who had become something of a father figure to me, pulled me aside. "When you arrived, you were a lost girl," he said in his heavily accented English. "Now you leave as a strong woman. Athens will always be your second home." I landed in Boston on a crisp September day, 5 years after being abandoned in Greece. America felt both familiar and foreign. The language was easy, but the pace, the cultural nuances I had once taken for granted now required adjustment. I had changed, become more European in some ways, more global in my outlook. I rented a small studio apartment in Somerville and began working as an assistant to Harriet Winters, a friend of Lawrence's who specialized in property development. The Boston real estate market was indeed different from Athens, more regulated and exponentially more expensive, but the fundamentals remained the same. Identify value, understand neighborhood trends, and recognize potential where others see problems. My first 6 months were challenging. I worked long hours, took real estate courses to get my license, and stretched my savings as far as possible. At night, I would sometimes look at social media profiles of my former classmates from Westfield High. Many had graduated college and were starting careers or graduate programs paths that had been stolen from me. But rather than bitterness, these glimpses into alternate lives fueled my determination. One profile I never searched for was Tyler's. The betrayal from my brother felt almost as deep as that from my parents. He had known about their plan and said nothing. Not once in 5 years had he reached out to check if I was alive or dead. My first solo investment came when Harriet mentioned a foreclosed condo in an up-and-coming neighborhood. The unit needed significant renovations, but the location had potential. I pooled my savings with a small business loan and took the plunge. For 3 months, I worked my day job with Harriet and spent evenings and weekends renovating the condo. I did much of the cosmetic work myself, skills I had learned helping Lawrence in Athens. When the property sold 4 months later, I made a profit of $45,000. "Not bad for your first American flip," Harriet said when I showed her the final numbers. "You have got good instincts, Amber." That first success gave me the capital and confidence to continue. I established Phoenix Acquisitions, naming my company after the mythical bird that rises from ashes, a symbol that had become deeply personal to me. Over the next 3 years, I expanded from single condo renovations to small multi-family properties, gradually building a reputation in Boston's real estate community. By my 25th birthday, Phoenix Acquisitions had grown into a respected boutique firm specializing in revitalizing undervalued properties. I had a team of 5 employees, a portfolio of 12 rental properties, and annual revenues exceeding $1 million. The frightened 17-year-old abandoned in Athens was now a successful businesswoman with a corner office overlooking the Charles River. I rarely thought about my parents anymore. The pain had dulled, replaced by indifference. I had built my life without them, and their absence had ceased to define me. Until one ordinary Tuesday morning when everything changed. I was reviewing potential acquisition properties with my assistant Julia Preston when a familiar address caught my eye. "Wait, go back to that listing," I said, my coffee cup freezing midway to my lips. Julia scrolled back to the previous property, a colonial-style house in Westfield, Connecticut, listed as a pre-foreclosure sale. The address was one I would never forget: 22 Maple Avenue, my childhood home. "What about it?" Julia asked. "It is a bit far from our usual territory, but the numbers look solid." Bank is foreclosing next month if the owners cannot come up with the back payments. My mind raced. The listing included exterior photos that showed the house needed maintenance, the once pristine lawn now overgrown. What had happened? My father had been a successful investment banker, my mother, a fanatical maintainer of appearances. How had they fallen so far? I need more information on this property, I said, keeping my voice steady. Full financial history owner details everything. Julia looked curious, but didn't question me. One of the benefits of being the boss. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment with a glass of wine and a folder containing everything my team had been able to discover about my former home. The story it told was one of financial decline and poor decisions. George Thompson had lost his position at the investment firm 7 years ago following complaints about ethical breaches. He had struggled to find equivalent work and eventually started his own financial consulting business that never quite succeeded. Martha had been forced to take a job as an office manager, a position far below the social status she had once prized. Most interestingly, Tyler had graduated from college and moved to California, rarely returning to Connecticut. According to social media, he had effectively distanced himself from our parents, just as they had distanced themselves from me. The house had been refinanced multiple times with the latest mortgage now 4 months in arrears. The bank was proceeding with foreclosure, with an auction date set for the following month. I closed the folder and walked to my window, looking out at the Boston skyline glittering in the night. A strange sense of poetic justice washed over me. The parents who had abandoned me to teach me independence were now losing the very symbol of the life they had chosen over caring for their daughter. The question was, what would I do with this information? I could simply ignore it, continue building my life without looking back. Or I could seize this unexpected opportunity to confront the past on my own terms. By morning, I had made my decision. Phoenix Acquisitions would make an offer on 22 Maple Avenue, not as Amber Thompson, but as an anonymous corporate entity. I would buy my childhood home, and in doing so, complete a circle that had begun 9 years earlier on a sunny morning in Athens. The process of purchasing 22 Maple Avenue proceeded with clinical precision. I established a separate LLC under Phoenix Acquisitions to maintain anonymity and had my company's attorney handle all communications. My offer was straightforward, full payment of the outstanding mortgage balance plus 10%, with a condition that the current owners could remain in the property for 30 days after closing to arrange new accommodations. From the bank's perspective, this was an ideal solution that avoided the costs and uncertainties of a foreclosure auction. From my perspective, it was both a sound business investment and something more personal, something I wasn't quite ready to name. 2 weeks after submitting the offer, my attorney called with news. "The bank has accepted," she said. "But there's an unusual request from the current owners. They want to meet the buyer before vacating. Apparently, they have emotional attachment to the house and want to know it's going to someone who will appreciate its history." I almost laughed at the irony. Emotional attachment. The same people who had abandoned their daughter in a foreign country were now concerned about who would live in their house. "Tell them the buyer prefers to remain anonymous," I replied. "But I'll consider a meeting after closing." The next 3 weeks were a blur of paperwork, financial transfers, and preparations. I took a leave of absence from my Boston office, telling my team I needed personal time for a special project. Only Julia knew I was traveling to Connecticut, and even she didn't know the full story. As the closing date approached, I found myself experiencing a strange mix of emotions. There was satisfaction, certainly, at the symmetry of the situation. But there was also a resurgence of pain I thought I had long since processed. Purchasing the house meant confronting not just my parents, but also the lost childhood and alternate life that had been taken from me. The day before closing, I drove from Boston to Westfield. I checked into a hotel on the outskirts of town, not ready yet to see the house or risk running into anyone who might recognize me. That night, I barely slept, my mind replaying memories of the family that had once lived in that colonial on Maple Avenue. Morning brought closing day. I met my attorney at her office, signed the final documents, and officially became the owner of my childhood home. The keys felt heavy in my hand, weighted with more than metal. The previous owners still want that meeting, my attorney reminded me. I've scheduled it for tomorrow at 10 if that works for you. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That afternoon I drove past the house, not stopping, just a slow cruise by the property that was now legally mine. It looked smaller than I remembered, shabbier, the white paint peeling in places, the garden beds overgrown. Like my parents, it had not aged well. Back at my hotel, I prepared for the confrontation to come. I selected my outfit carefully, a tailored charcoal suit that projected success and authority, subtle makeup that highlighted my features while maintaining a professional appearance, and the small pendant Sophia had given me before I left. Athens, a reminder of who I had become. I rehearsed what I might say, the questions I might ask, the answers I might give. But in truth, I knew that no amount of preparation could fully ready me for coming face to face with the people who had thrown me away like an unwanted possession. That night I received an unexpected call from an unknown number. When I answered, the voice on the other end was hauntingly familiar. "Is this Amber Thompson?" my brother Tyler asked. For a moment I couldn't respond. 9 years of silence, and now he called the night before I was to meet our parents. "Yes," I finally said, my voice cool. "How did you get this number, Tyler?" "It wasn't easy," he admitted. "I've been looking for you for years, Amber. Ever since I found out what they did." "Found out," I repeated, anger flaring. "You were there. You knew they weren't coming back for me." "No," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't. They told me you had decided to stay in Greece for a study abroad program. I only learned the truth when I found the draft of their letter to you 2 years later while I was home from college." His words hit me like a physical blow. Tyler hadn't known. They had lied to him just as they had betrayed me. "I tried to find you," he continued, "but they had erased everything. No contact information, nothing. By the time I pieced together that you were in Athens, the cafe where you had worked said you had returned to America." "Why are you calling now?" I asked, still processing this revelation. "Because I'm in Westfield," he replied. "Mom called in hysterics about losing the house. When I flew in and started asking questions, I discovered that the buyer was a company called Phoenix Acquisitions. It took some digging, but I eventually connected it to you." The silence between us, stretched 9 years of separation, distilled into soundless seconds. "Are you here to confront them?" he finally asked. "Because if you are, I want to be there too. We both deserve answers." By the time we ended the call, we had agreed that Tyler would meet me at my hotel in the morning. Together we would face the parents who had damaged us both, though in very different ways. Sleep eluded me that night. My carefully constructed plan had already changed with Tyler's unexpected alliance. How much more would shift when I finally stood before George and Martha Thompson? The morning dawned clear and cold, a perfect New England autumn day. Tyler arrived at my hotel lobby exactly at 8:30, just as we had arranged. The years had changed him from the 14-year-old boy I remembered into a tall, lean man with our father's jawline but softer eyes. Our reunion was awkward, 9 years of absence creating a chasm neither of us quite knew how to bridge. We sat in the hotel restaurant sipping coffee and tentatively reconnecting. "You look good, Amber," he said. "Successful." "I am," I replied simply. "What about you? Social media suggests you're as far from mom and dad as possible." Tyler nodded, his expression darkening. "After I found out what they did to you, everything changed. I couldn't look at them the same way. The perfect family facade crumbled. I finished high school, went to college as far away as I could get, and barely maintained contact after that. Yet you came when Mom called about the house I observed. I came to make sure they didn't somehow manipulate someone else into solving their problems, he corrected. I never imagined that someone would be you. We spent the next hour sharing abbreviated versions of our lives since the separation. Tyler had graduated from Stanford, now worked as an environmental engineer in San Francisco, and was engaged to be married the following spring. He had built a life separate from the toxicity of our upbringing, though the scars remained. At 9:45, we drove separately to 22 Maple Avenue, agreeing that Tyler would arrive first and I would enter 5 minutes later. I wanted the full impact of my appearance to hit our parents without warning. Sitting in my rental car around the corner from the house, I took deep breaths to steady myself. This confrontation was 9 years in the making. I had imagined it countless times during my early days in Athens, dreamed of throwing their cruelty back in their faces. But now that the moment had arrived, I felt strangely calm. I didn't need their approval, or even their remorse. I simply needed closure. At precisely 10 o'clock, I walked up the familiar pathway to my childhood home and rang the doorbell. The chime was new, not the Westminster melody I remembered. A small change that somehow symbolized all the larger shifts that had occurred. The door opened to reveal my mother, Martha Thompson. Her once perfectly colored and styled hair now showed strands of gray and fine lines mapped her face. She wore a blouse I didn't recognize, likely one of the few good pieces remaining from her former expansive wardrobe. "You must be from Phoenix Acquisitions," she said with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Please come in. My husband and son are waiting in the living room." She didn't recognize me. Somehow, despite only 9 years passing, despite me being her daughter, she looked at my face and saw a stranger. It was both shocking and perfectly fitting. I followed her into the formal living room, the space where we had entertained guests but rarely relaxed as a family. Tyler sat perched on the edge of an armchair, his expression carefully neutral. My father stood by the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel in a pose that seemed calculated to project confidence despite his circumstances. "George Thompson," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We wanted to express our appreciation for the 30-day arrangement. Finding new housing has been challenging." I took his hand and shook it firmly, looking directly into the eyes that had once refused to meet mine as he planned my abandonment. "I understand attachment to property," I said evenly, "though I believe some things are more worthy of attachment than others." Something in my voice must have triggered recognition. His brow furrowed and he tilted his head slightly, studying my face more carefully. "Do we know each other?" he asked. "You should," I replied, removing my suit jacket and draping it over the back of the sofa. "You raised me for 17 years in this house before deciding I was, quote, old enough to survive on my own in Athens, Greece." The color drained from his face. Beside him, my mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Amber," she whispered. "Hello, Martha, George." I deliberately used their first names, denying them the parental titles they had forfeited. Surprise. My father recovered first, his shock transforming into defensive anger. "What is this? Some kind of ambush?" "Tyler, did you know about this?" Tyler stood, moving to stand beside me. "I found out yesterday. But this isn't about me. This is about what you and Mom did 9 years ago, and apparently never had the courage to tell me about until I found that draft letter." "We did what was necessary," my father said stiffly. "Amber was always headstrong, difficult. We provided her with funds, a trust account." $5,000, I corrected. "Not exactly a king's ransom for abandoning your child in a foreign country." "We gave you independence," my mother interjected, finding her voice. "Look at you now. Obviously it worked out well." Her words struck me as so profoundly delusional that I actually laughed. "Is that how you've justified it to yourselves all these years? That abandoning me was some kind of tough love strategy for success? You always wanted to do things your way," she continued, her tone taking on the martyred quality. I remembered so well. Nothing we did was ever good enough. We simply gave you what you wanted, freedom from our rules. I wanted parents who loved me, I said quietly. Instead, I got two people so focused on appearances and convenience that they were willing to discard their own child rather than actually parent her. My father's jaw tightened. You have no idea the sacrifices we made for you, the opportunities we provided. And now, what you've come to gloat because we've hit a rough patch, to throw our current misfortune in our faces. No, I said, maintaining my composure. I came because 9 years ago you made a choice that forever changed the course of my life. Today I've made a choice that will change yours. Poetic, don't you think? If you're here to evict us immediately, that wasn't the agreement, he said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he had used throughout my childhood when laying down rules. The agreement stands, I replied. You have 30 days. But I thought you should know exactly who purchased your house. The daughter you abandoned has come home, though this time on her terms, not yours. My mother had sunk onto the sofa, her perfectly manicured hands twisting in her lap. How did you even know about the foreclosure? Have you been monitoring us all these years? Pure coincidence, I said. Phoenix Acquisitions regularly reviews pre-foreclosure listings. Your address appeared, and I recognized it immediately. Phoenix Acquisitions is yours, my father asked, his tone suggesting disbelief that I could have built something successful. I founded it 5 years ago. After returning from Greece, I confirmed. Currently, we manage properties valued at over $30 million across 3 states. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken realizations. They had discarded me, expecting me to fail, perhaps even to come crawling back. Instead, I had built a life and success that now positioned me as their landlord. What happens after 30 days? My mother finally asked, her voice small. That, I said, picking up my jacket, will depend on our conversation tomorrow. I've booked a private room at the Westfield Inn for noon. I expect both of you to be there, prepared to answer every question Tyler and I have about your decisions 9 years ago. Your future living arrangements will be determined based on that conversation. As I turned to leave, my father called after me. You can't just waltz back into our lives and dictate terms, Amber. We're still your parents. I paused at the doorway and looked back at him. No, George. You forfeited that title in a hotel room in Athens with a note and a bank card. What you are now is former owners of a property I've purchased. How much more you become is entirely up to you. Outside, the crisp autumn air filled my lungs as I walked to my car. 9 years of imagined confrontations had culminated in this moment. I had faced my abandoners, not as a victim, but as a victor. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and for the first time since reading that devastating note in Athens, I felt truly free. The meeting at the Westfield Inn the following day was both brutal and cathartic. For 4 hours, Tyler and I asked the questions that had haunted us for years, demanding honest answers from the people who had shaped and then shattered our childhoods. Why Greece? I asked. Why not just kick me out locally if you wanted me gone so badly? My father shifted uncomfortably. We knew if you were nearby, family and friends would ask questions. Distance created a clean break. Clean for whom, Tyler challenged. Not for Amber, certainly. And not for me, since you lied about what had happened. Gradually, the full picture emerged. Their decision had been driven by a toxic mix of financial pressure, marital problems, and fundamental selfishness. My father had made risky investments that failed, creating strain on their perfect lifestyle. Rather than downsizing or adapting, they decided to reduce their financial burden by eliminating one dependent. We always saw you as the strong one, Amber, my mother offered, as if this justified their actions. Tyler was younger, more vulnerable. I was 17, I reminded her. A minor. Your child. What became clear through their halting explanations and justifications was that they had never truly seen me as a person with needs and feelings. I had been an accessory to their ideal family image, and when maintaining that image became too difficult, I was the expendable piece. By early afternoon, we had extracted as much truth as they were capable of providing. Tyler was visibly shaken, his idealized memories of our family permanently altered by the revelations. "I need to know what happens now," my father finally said. "With the house." I had given this considerable thought since purchasing the property. My initial impulse had been punitive: evict them, sell the house, complete the circle of abandonment. But sitting across from them, seeing the genuine fear in their eyes, I realized that such an action would make me more like them, not less. "Here's what I'm proposing," I said, sliding a document across the table. "Phoenix Acquisitions will convert the property into a rental. You can remain as tenants under a 2-year lease with rent set at market rate minus 20%. They exchanged glances, clearly surprised by the offer. "However," I continued, "there are conditions. First, you will both participate in family therapy sessions with Dr. Elaine Bennett in Hartford. I've already arranged this, and the costs will be covered by me." "Therapy," my father scoffed. "That's hardly necessary." "It's non-negotiable," I stated firmly. "Second, you will both write comprehensive letters of apology to me and to Tyler, acknowledging specifically what you did and the harm it caused. These letters should demonstrate genuine reflection, not excuses." My mother nodded slowly. "And the third condition? You will establish a college fund for underprivileged students who have been abandoned or estranged from their families. I've set up the framework through my foundation. You'll contribute 15% of your income to this fund for the duration of the lease." My father's face reddened. 15%. That's excessive. We're already struggling financially. "Consider it 9 years of back child support," I replied calmly. "These are my terms. You're free to reject them and find other housing within the 30-day period originally agreed upon." After some tense discussion between themselves, they accepted. Not out of remorse, I suspected, but out of practical necessity. The housing market in Westfield was expensive, and their credit was damaged by the foreclosure. My offer, despite its conditions, was their best option. As we prepared to leave, my mother reached out tentatively to touch my arm. "Will you ever forgive us, Amber?" I considered her question carefully. "Forgiveness isn't a single moment, Martha. It's a process. I'm not doing this out of forgiveness. I'm doing it because I refuse to let what you did determine who I become. Whether forgiveness is part of my future isn't something I can answer today." Over the following months, an uneasy new reality established itself. My parents began their therapy sessions initially with reluctance, but gradually with more engagement, as Dr. Bennett skillfully navigated their defenses. Their letters of apology, after several rejected drafts, eventually demonstrated genuine insight into the harm they had caused. I returned to Boston, resuming my role at Phoenix Acquisitions while maintaining weekly video calls with Tyler. Our relationship, fragmented by our parents' actions, slowly began to rebuild. He invited me to his wedding in San Francisco, where I stood beside him as his best woman, a role that felt symbolically appropriate for our unconventional sibling journey. 6 months after the confrontation, I established the Phoenix Scholarship Foundation, using my own funds plus my parents' contributions to support young people who had experienced family abandonment or estrangement. The foundation became my way of transforming personal trauma into purpose, creating opportunities for others facing situations similar to what I had endured. My relationship with my parents remained complicated. There were no tearful reconciliations or instant healing of deep wounds. Instead, there was a gradual, cautious rebuilding of communication. Not as the parent-child relationship that had been irreparably broken, but as adults acknowledging a painful shared history while tentatively exploring whether any form of connection remained possible. "You've built an extraordinary life," Amber, my father said during a brief visit to Boston for a foundation event. "I wish I could take credit for it, but we both know I can't." "No," I agreed. "But you can take responsibility for your actions. That's why you're here today supporting this foundation. It doesn't erase the past, but it acknowledges it." The most profound healing, however, came not from any interaction with my parents, but from the family I chose to create around me. Sophia and Nikos flew from Athens for Thanksgiving, bringing with them the warmth and unconditional support that had sustained me during my darkest days. Lawrence and Harriet became mentors and friends who celebrated my successes without agenda. Tyler and his wife Jennifer welcomed me into their home and hearts, creating space for the sibling relationship we had been denied. 9 years after being abandoned with nothing but a note and a bank card, I had come full circle. The house on Maple Avenue was now an asset in my growing real estate portfolio. The parents who had discarded me now lived on my terms. The scared 17-year-old had become a confident, successful 26-year-old who defined family by love and loyalty, not by blood or obligation. Perhaps most importantly, I had learned that, while we cannot control what happens to us, we can control how we respond. The abandonment that was meant to break me instead became the forge that strengthened me. The parents who thought I merely needed to survive underestimated my capacity to thrive. If there is one thing I would tell anyone facing their own version of abandonment or betrayal, it is this: your worth is not determined by those who failed to see it. The greatest revenge against those who hurt you is not punishment, but creating a life so full and rich that their absence becomes irrelevant to your story. What about you? Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal or abandonment? Share your story in the comments below. Remember that your experiences, however painful, have shaped but do not define you. If my journey resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience, and share this video with someone who might need to know they are not alone in their struggle. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful phoenixes rise from the most devastating fires.